but that's good because you should solidify your foundations. Variables and references. I definitely went into detail about this pretty early on. I even did some fancy drawing. They're probably going to recreate some of that drawing. So let's take a look. So we got, this is the name of our variable, and we are calling it x. Var x is equal to 10. We use the assignment operator. Recently, I've heard a lot of you saying, you know, do I use triple equals? Do I use single equals? If you're using a single equals, that means you want to change the value of something. So like var x equals 10. If after that you were to say 12, or x is equal to 12, like it's going to change what x is. Keep that in mind. If you want to compare something and see whether or not they are the same, then you can say like var x equals 10, var y equals 10, x triple equals y. That would come back as a true statement. So keep that in mind. This is the value we associated with label x. Code. All right, so we got var x. Right now, if we were to log what x is, everyone in chat, tell me what it would log. You are so right. It will give back undefined. Right now, if I was to log what y was, what would it tell me? Reference error. That is totally correct. Cool. Glad. Very happy. All right. Let's keep going. So here, we've got var x, creates a space in memory, and associates that space with the label x. Now we have x is equal to hello. It now is no longer undefined. It is now defined with a string, and it is now hello. So it creates a space here, and it says, here is variable x, here is hello. Let's create this pretty little arrow, and we're going to say this points to hello. Now we're saying y, var y, which this declares the variable, the equal sign. This is the assignment operator, which means that we're going to now give y a value, x. Variables cannot point to other variables. What it's going to do is it's going to say, what is x currently pointing to, which we know it's currently pointing to hello, and it's going to also point to that value. These two can never point to each other. Keep that in mind. Cool. Now we're going to say x is equal to string world, which means that it no longer points to hello, and now it points to world. Keep in mind, y is still pointing to hello. See if any of this stuff is necessary to read. No. Cool. So if we have var array is equal to array, we create that in memory. Be right back. We have created this array. For some reason, it has 3 slots. That's not necessarily important, but out of curiosity, if we did have var array and we set it to an array and we logged just ARR and hit return, what would we get back? Cool. Now, if we had the same thing, var r, or var ARR is equal to an array, and we logged ARR, and then we put brackets, and we put 0, what would it log back? Undefined, totally. So it is the first index in that array, but because there's no value assigned here, it's just going to say undefined. So something else that you should keep in mind, and I'm going to type this in chat, if we had var array is equal to an array, that's not an array, is equal to an array, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we did array at 8, and we were to log that, what it would do is it would go to this array that we've created, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would create undefined, 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 and it would give back undefined at the end. These wouldn't be logged, but if we said array at 8 is equal to, let's say 7, then what it would do is it would go through and it would say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then undefined, undefined, and it would keep doing that until we got to the 8th index, and it would plug in, let's just say that, a 7. And it would log 1, 2, 3, 4, undefined, 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 7. And that is something that you should keep in mind, because like a lot of people think that it'll give back a reference error. It won't. It will, like all of those things are just undefined. Yeah, so good to know. Keep that in mind.
Why was the array with just 0 in it logged as undefined? Why wouldn't it be?
So if we have an array like this, and if we're trying to access the first index, so let's say that array, like var array is equal to that. And if we just said, what is, why does it keep capitalizing? Okay, what is array? It's going to come back with this. But if we say, what is array at index of 0, it's going to say undefined. And that's for that exact same reason that if we did array at 8, even though there are only 1, 2, 3, 4 things in here, then it's going to like everything in between that is going to be undefined, right? So if anything here is not defined, it's going to be undefined. No, sorry. That was probably my fault then. Yeah, so like this, it essentially would have been the same as, saying like that, just because they're not defined yet. Yeah, I apologize for the confusion on this one here, because if var r is equal to an array and the first index is 0, and then you said array 0, yeah, it would give back 0. Cool. Let's move along. So here we have var array. We're pointing it to this array that has no values in it. And we're saying array at index of 0 is now hello. So it's going to point over and say, hey, this string of hello at index of 0 in this array is now also hello. Keep in mind, like, I think we've mentioned this before. If you have an array or an object of just like 1, 2, 3, and you take that array of 1, 2, 3, you know what? Let me bring up a REPL. All right, so let's say var x is equal to an array 1, 2, 3. Cool? Nope, that's not what I want. 3. And we're going to say var y is equal to 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is going to give back true or false. So in chat, I want you to type out whether or not this gives back true or false. We'll go ahead and just console log it. We've got true, true, false, true, true, false, true. Cool. So we are pretty split down the middle. When we do it, it is false. These are not the same. Now, if we said var a is equal to 2, var b is equal to 2, console log a triple equals b. I'm going to comment that one out. What would we get back now? Not the trues. Cool. True. It is true. Numbers are stored in the same location. Keep that in mind. Let's say C is equal to string. D is also equal to string. Let's put in these fancy semicolons because we are so fancy. C, D. All right, now what do you think? Okay. True. All right, let's get crazy now. Let's say var m is equal to an object, and this object is nice and simple. All right, now what do you guys think? Feel like some of you are understanding. Cool. Great. So in chat, does anyone have maybe a nice, simple solution for what I could do to these falses for arrays and objects to make them not false? Like, can I make them true in some way? That's just like really simple, really easy. And it's okay if you don't know. Type of. So let's see. If we did type of, that would basically say whether or not they are both the same thing. So like for the string one, it would both say whether or not they're strings, but it wouldn't really say if they are the same string. And as for the objects, like arrays, if you were to do type of an array, it's going to tell you it's an object, which is something that you should know. Store variable inside of variables. Yep. Cool. Don't you ever, Helen, what is that? 2 equal signs? Get that out of here. We are not doing that. Check
okay, in my defense, there's a lot of resources that say you can use 2 sometimes. I don't. I'm just.
This is JavaScript. Don't you dare. All right. Check this out. We are going to JSON dot stringify it. And we are going to JSON dot stringify in. And hopefully we get a type error because JSON dot stringify is not a function. Do I have an issue?
You have a typo in the right stringify.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Are you sure?
Also, the first string of
And
five.
on the left string.
Team, help.
You misspelled stringify in the first one too.
Yeah.
In both of them, really? Look at this.
You're missing an N. You're missing an N on the first one.
String. Okay, got it. Does that look good? Are we happy with that? Yeah? All right. Cool, true. All right, so what this is really doing is it's going to M, and it's taking this, which is stored somewhere in location, and it's just going to go like that. And now it's a string. And we know that when we compared 2 strings earlier, if they were identical, it came back to true. So it just strings both of them. This is something that's really important to know, especially for your technical interview, okay? So like if you ever get in the situation where you need to compare 2 arrays or 2 objects, make sure you use json.stringify. If your technical interviewer is super fancy and they get tricky on you and they send you a function that basically does json.stringify for you, make sure that you kind of understand that what it's going to do is it's just going to stringify them both, compare them, and then give you back a true or false. This is super important to know. Strings are stored in the same memory location. Objects are not. And remember, arrays are also objects.
Can you show us what Stringify does?
I did. It does this.
Oh, okay.
It takes your object or your array or whatever, and it stringifies it. So instead of actually being an object, it turns it into a string of the object. So like if I were to actually just say like, hey, what is this type of or whatever, it's going to say it's a string. But if you did it here, it's going to say it's an object. And you should all tonight for your homework really practice on how to spell Stringify because it's very difficult. I find it very challenging. Cool.
And one more time, why does it not work when they're not in string form?
Because they're stored in two different memory locations. And so let me see if I can find my slides and all these tabs. Cool. So here we had, you can imagine these as being like memory locations. So like hello as a string, var y points to that, and array at index of 0 also points to that. This is stored in the same memory location. You can imagine like these arrows are actually pointing to them. If we then said, var x is equal to hello as well, world would no longer have anything pointing to it, and it would get garbage collected, and it would just disappear forever. Like it's just gone until we create it again. But as long as something is pointing to this, like if we changed var y to equal whatever x is, then it would also point to world, and something would still be pointing to hello, so it would still exist. Cool. All right, let's see. Yes, that we went over. We have an object. Var object is equal to this object, points to that. Object.hello is equal to world. So object.hello is equal to world. Okay, yeah. So like key hello, because that's what that does. You can imagine the period gets removed. There are brackets here, and it puts in a string. That's what this is. You plug it in there, and we're saying it's equal to the string world. It gets plugged in as the value. Yeah, no, that's okay. Cool. Let's add another key value pair to the object. Object.population. So what it does is it creates this string population. It plugs it in as the key, and now it gives it a number value and plugs that in here. So if we were to say array at 0 is now equal to population, it reassigns that, right? Because it's an equal. Array at 1, which is currently undefined, is equal to object.population. We go to the object, go to population, it points to that value. Definitely stuff that you should play around with and understand how it works. Do I have any questions? Nicholas, we got a P. Was this an old P or a new P?
A new one, just to make sure. Is this share on Slack, or if not, can you share it? Because the ripple part. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can share that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a main takeaway from all of this here is objects, including arrays, objects and arrays, are stored in two different memory locations. Keep that in mind. It means that if you have two of the exact same looking arrays and you try to compare them to each other, it's going to give you false. You need to know that. It's important. A quick fix for that is you can stringify it. An alternate fix, which is not as easy, like for some reason, if they were like, hey, take these two arrays and we want to check to make sure that they're the same, instead, like, and there was a rule that you just couldn't use JSON.stringify, what you would have to do is then you would have to have a loop for each of these arrays, and you would have to loop through each one and say, okay, is 1 equal to 1? Yes. Okay, is 2 equal to 2? Yes. Okay, is 3 equal to 3? Yes. Oh, wait, but this one's longer. This one has a 4th. It's like, well, is 4 equal to undefined? No. So then you would return false. That is just something that you should know, keep in mind, kind of think how you can do that stuff. Is string destructive? No. Well, unless you reassign it. So like, where did I have that? So like here, I'm just console logging JSON.stringify m. But if I said like m is equal to JSON.stringify m, here, we're going to test that actually. So if I had this, get rid of that. Here, I'm going to throw in a console log. Also, you guys should practice console logging. Console logging is great. It's going to tell you what the JavaScript interpreter thinks. And it's a very useful tool. All right, so now console log m. And we're going to say after stringify m before. Cool. That looks right to me. So before we had, you know what, let's do some typos also. Let's say, cool. So before we stringify it, it's an object. Here's the object. After we stringify it, it's an object. It looks like it changed the strings a little bit. Not entirely sure why, but it definitely came back as a string. Something to keep in mind, like type of m was changed here, right? So you would have to use the assignment operator of the equal sign to actually change it. Otherwise, it's not destructive. Did I even show? No. So if I just did JSON.stringify m, after stringify log, and we run this, it's still an object. Even after we stringify it, it's still an object because we're only console logging it. We're not actually changing it with the assignment operator. Cool.
Why would one be the quotation marks?
Yeah, why would like this part right here not be in quotation marks?
I guess like why would 1 be and not 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. I assume it's something to do with the console log. So like if I would have put them in return statements and in a function instead, and then I just console logged the actual function call, I assume the whole thing would have been in string. That's kind of an assumption.
I'd agree. There are weird things with console logs and how the console displays your information.
Yeah. So like function log takes in, let's just say a variable. We can't do that. Let's just say v. So if we had v is equal to JSON.stringify v, and then return v. And then we said log m. Actually, you know what? Let me try it without console logging it. So m originally is just this. JSON.stringify it. Okay. And let me get rid of that, that, and that. Okay, do this. Okay, so now it has strings. See, so yeah, it just needed a return. It's just kind of this weird thing that console log is a little unpredictable sometimes. So if I console logged the call of this function, yeah, see, now all of a sudden it's gone. Something to be aware of, I guess. Here, yeah. Yeah, so this kind of shows like if you console log something, it's not necessarily going to be the exact same thing as if you were to return it. So the return did put the string like around this object, whereas the other one did not. But even still, like if you did a type of V, I can't do that. I need to console log that. Yeah, it comes back as a string.
And the one being in quotes within the object is just a quirk, you said?
Sorry, what?
The one being in quotes, even within the object, is just a quirk, or is that what you're saying?
It was, the question was like, you see how we have quotes around the return statement because we stringified it? It's like we console logged this even after we stringified it, but it's not giving us the string around these, which is kind of strange.
But why is the one in quotes and the two isn't? Oh, is
Because
that
it's a
just 'cause
key.
that's a key?
Yeah, exactly. So like if we did, okay, here's some good exercises. All right, so let's take this out, this out, this out. Okay, so we have that. Let's take them all out. Okay. So if I did, see if I can do that. Yeah. If I did log dot one, m1, what do you think is going to get returned? Don't be shy. More answers. There we go. Okay, cool. Missing after argument. It's trying to, because it's not an object. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. If I were to change that to this. Okay. So that's interesting. Something that you should know, which I guess I didn't realize. If we did this dot, we get like a syntax error. Which I guess what it's trying to do is it's trying to accept something and then return it. But if we, I guess it can't like look up the value of this key if we use dot notation, because
I don't think dot notation works with numbers.
right, is that the problem?
Yeah, but I'm surprised. I actually didn't realize that you could do bracket notation for numbers without quotes and it would work.
Right.
Apparently it does.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Huh.
Okay. Yeah, I guess always learning something new. Cool. Yeah, so again, main takeaway here is like console log is a very useful tool. If something isn't quite expecting, it's not doing what you're expecting it to do, like try to figure out why. You know, like that's kind of a big thing. Know when to console log, know where to console log. If you're console logging inside of a loop, know that it's going to log every iteration. So like sometimes what I'll do if I'm console logging, what does, that's a good question. Well, so like this, oh, dot, yeah, unexpected string. Well, what if we changed this?
But you can't put in strings after a dot.
No, because what that does is probably just, well, I don't know if that goes like this order. If it didn't have a dot, you know, like, because you can imagine anytime you have like the dot, it's really just like gonna do that, right? And then it'll plug whatever's in there. So yeah, I know we don't really go over like what console logging is used for, how it can be used. Like I often see like on this line, whenever I did after Stringify log m, if I wanted to later like type of m, like this one I put before m, and it's like, it's a good way so that way you don't get lost in your console logs. Because like even in technical interviews, I'll see a lot of people like they'll go through and they'll be like, well, I need a console log here and a console log here, a console log here, and they run it and they do it inside of a loop, and then all of a sudden it logs like 12 things, and they're like, oh yeah, this doesn't look right here, and it's like, that looks fine, I think, but like if I had some sort of way to like differentiate like what my console logs are, like it would be super helpful. It's kind of like anytime somebody's building a function that just counts, if you were to count, you know, just build a function that's going to count up to whatever number you pass it to. And it would say, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I passed it 4, right? You could, inside of like that while loop, for example, say, let's console log our current count, right? Because like our count is going to get incremented every time. And then it would actually log like 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could say like current count is, and then, you know, log that variable. And like that's a super useful tool. It's going to take practice. The more and more you work with it, the more it's going to make sense. So I know that this is a whole bunch of just garbled stuff, but I will share it for you guys so you can do whatever you want with it. Feel free to play around in the environment. You will learn a lot from just messing around with code. And I will paste that in Slack. Do we have any questions about anything? Anything at all?
I actually have a question about console logging during recursion.
Cool.
So is there like a place where you do it? Because I'm going back to do the exercises like solo, and I want to test to see like that it's actually spitting out what it's doing. And so I'm trying to console log everything.
Yeah.
But then I get a lot of stuff, and it doesn't quite make sense with what, it's not like a neat and organized like systematic way of thinking. It's kind of just a jumbled mess of a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, so with recursion specifically, there are definitely places I would put console log in, like in particular. One, I would definitely always keep in mind all of your console logs have to be above return statements, because if you return, nothing's going to get logged below that, right? Okay.
Definitely learned that through trial and error. So
right, exactly. So I would put one in your base case, so that way if your base case ever gets hit, it's going to say, you know, and I would just console log a string. It doesn't even matter if you console log a variable, it doesn't matter. Just say like base case hit. That's what I would do personally. If that never gets hit, you probably found out that you're like in an infinite loop anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Not that you, Helen, would know anything about infinite loops.
That wasn't called for. Not
It was
nice.
mildly called for.
Okay, you learn a lot from these mistakes. Okay, so that's fine.
And then above your recursion statement, I would probably say, like in a string, like make a recursive call. And then you could log something. So maybe some recursion functions have like an outside variable of like a counter or something like that. You could log that every time if you want. Even if not, like you could just log that you're making a recursive call and then go back and like just count them. The problem with like trying to count how many recursive calls you're making is that like if you were to declare a variable inside of your function, it's just going to get overwritten every time you make a recursive call. So that is kind of a bummer. But if you're just like testing stuff or something like that, you could just put a counter outside, like a variable counter, just outside that function, start it off at 0. And then anytime you do a console log, you can also increment that number. And yeah, that might help show you like how many recursive calls you're making. Yeah, recursion is definitely a little tricky whenever it comes to console logs.
Thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? Yeah, let's get some B's and P's. Loving it. Awesome. All right, Keely, what are we doing now?
So, believe it or not, there are actually no exercises for you to practice this specific lecture material. But sadly, this is our last class with you guys for the next week as we all take some time for the holidays. But time for phase 2. So phase 2, we're going to go over a little bit of what that means right now. So that you have material to keep working on even when we're not meeting as a class. So, here we go. All right, so phase 2 overview. What is phase 2? So phase 2 is going to give you problem solving practice. It's done in something called Replit. And it's 3 modules. So there's module 0, which is a diagnostic, module 1, mastering your basic tools, and module 2, which is focused on writing code well. So 3 parts for this.
Real quick, just going to interrupt for just a moment. I have heard in the past, I don't know if they changed them or not, but I have heard like people say that module 0 is maybe even tougher than like module 1. So don't worry about the order so much. Just do them like module 0, then module 1, module 2. Try not to skip it until you like actually get it. Yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah. And then extra reading. So talking about module 0 and module 1, in this module, you'll be writing a lot of small code snippets to nail down the basics. And we'll be covering topics like functions, conditionals, while, variable array, array iteration, objects, variables and references, higher order functions like map. And we've covered a lot of this in class already, but honestly, the only way that you get better at this is by a lot of problems, by doing a lot of problems. And the more problems you do, the more clear it will become, the more you'll run into errors and be able to be like, oh, now I learned that you can't do that way. Interesting. Module 2 problems, the fundamental difference is that these are word problems. So they're progressively longer, they're more open-ended, you'll need to create helper functions, Lego blocks, and testing. So in terms of helper functions, Lego blocks, how those 2 are related. Ideally, every function should do one simple thing. And so what you'll get used to is building helper functions that you can call within your other functions to help solve the total problem. So this is similar to how we created that full names function that took in a person object and made their full name. And then we had the other function that went through and actually put all those names into an array. So our full names function, the function that created the full names, was a helper function for our putting all those people's names into an array. So you'll get more practice on looking at problems and being able to realize like, hey, I need to make a helper function right now. Testing. So mathematics is the engineering rigor of most kinds of engineering, like mechanical. Well, we say testing is the engineering rigor of software engineering. So you will learn a little bit about testing, and that will be fundamental for your interview. You'll have to know how to write very basic tests to show that your code is working properly for the interview. So testing is really important. And then recipes. So there is a problem recipe that you'll be introduced to. So like things that you should do when you encounter a problem, and how to go about thinking and setting yourself up for success when solving that problem. We're going to practice being tidy. So really doing the proper indentation, matching braces, good variable naming, good function naming, making sure your variables are declared in the right place, remembering the var keyword. So I know a lot of people, when they start their for loop, they just say I equals 0. Really, remember, you need that var I equals 0. Similarly, when we're talking about proper indentation, making sure that else is on the line with the closing brace from the previous if statement. And making sure we're returning real values, not just console logging things. So we're really going to focus on being tidy, making sure our code is written well aesthetically as well. This will be something that interviewer considers when you're taking the interview as well. And yeah, and not passing in useless arguments. So there's an extra reading that we've included in the extra resources in your Learn app. So in this learn.makerpass.com, you'll see a section on the left-hand side that says extra resources. These are additional resources as you complete the problems, especially Module 2. Don't spend a bunch of class time looking these over. You really want to spend your time in class with your partner on the exercises. And you can look at these extra resources outside of class, but they're there for you if you want. And as far as what we're talking about with in class with your partner, based on your responses to the survey, that's how we pair you up, basically hoping that you're with someone of a pretty equivalent skill level, so that will be your partner as you work through these exercises. And we'll release those pairs soon. So getting started, there are a couple like housekeeping things that you need to do. So the access links to REPL and instructions are in Learn. You'll see the phase 2 section, and there's remote prep module 1, remote prep module 0 and 2, as well as the style guide. So if you forget how to write pretty code, you can check it out there. But you need to follow a special naming convention so that we can actually find your submissions, because when you submit, then we'll be able to find them. Then we can correct your work and say like, hey, you need to change this, and send your work back to you. Or we can say, great, you did an awesome job. No more work needed on this problem. So your username can be whatever you want. Your email should be the email that you have on the whiteboard. So remember, that's where we have our current pairs. There's a tab that says roster, and that's where you have the email that you put down for this class. Your first name should be your first name. Your last name, though, needs to be your last name plus the course tag. So for this one, we are RP51. So yep, the course tag is the same as your class-specific channel. Is that clear to everybody? Please name your stuff like this so that we can find you and give you feedback. So next steps and deadlines. Woo! It's scary. All right. So mock interview. You'll be able to schedule mock interviews. And these are 30-minute interviews. Your actual interview will be more around 45 minutes. But these 30-minute interviews are designed so that you still get exposure to a problem similar to what you'd expect on the technical interview. And then we can give you feedback on how you can improve. And then you can schedule another 30-minute mock interview and improve based on the feedback that we've given you. So that you, instead of having one really long interview and be like, well, these are all the things like you did wrong, good luck next time. We break it up into 2 smaller mock interviews so that you can actually get feedback, improve, and have another chance to practice. So from there, you will schedule your actual technical interview. Scary, not. And then there's different options. You'll get an accept. Woohoo, awesome, congratulations. And then 2 weeks before day one, you receive pre-course material. So there will be pre-course material that you need to finish before you actually start class. So don't get accepted and then decide you're going to leave the country and not have internet access up until the day that class starts. That's not going to work. And also there are some tech checks that are done before you actually start the program. So you need to make sure that you're still strong and on your technical game, even after you've technically received an accept, so that you can join your cohort and not be behind. You can get a 2-week reject. So if this is before, Aaron, I might need your help. Before January 6th, then this is a pre-course accept. And so that means that you're kind of accepted, but you need to actually do the pre-course material first and then retest to make sure you have your...
Means you're on thin ice.
Yeah.
So it means that we really want to accept you. And if you like keep working hard and like you can keep up with the pre-course material, you're going to be fine. Like I had somebody from my last class, she was flipping out. She got this 2-week reject, but they like gave her the pre-course work, nailed the pre-course work. They were like, cool, we're going to give you the go ahead. And now she's like in the program right now.
Yeah.
So don't flip out about that. Just like keep doing your thing.
Yeah.
So sorry. So with the pre-course accept, do you actually have to re-interview later, or are they just going to look over your pre-course material and say like, okay, you seem like you know what you're doing? Like, do we have to schedule another interview? Like,
that's a good question. You won't have to schedule another interview, but either I think what's going to happen is they're going to work closely with you and your pre-course work, and they're going to make sure that like it's right, basically.
Yeah, and they might reach out to you and schedule something like a one-on-one, but
yeah, you don't have to worry about, reaching out to apply again. It's not going to be that type of situation. It won't be that you have another interview. It's just going to be like, let's go over your pre-course work and see if it makes sense.
And if you get a pre-course accept, there's all that documentation and email they'll send you, like here's where you go to register for pre-course, et cetera, et cetera.
If you get a pre-course accept, you should be happy.
Yes, take it.
Woo! Yeah, you should.
Don't be like, oh, I wanted like a full regular accept. No, just take the pre-course accept. And then after January 6th, you might just have to re-interview. Yes? Okay.
Yeah, that would basically be that. Yeah.
So then the other option is a 4-week reject, which means that like, you weren't quite where we need you to be, but we think that within 4 weeks of continuous studying still, you'll be able to get there. So they say you can't come back for 4 weeks and then you can come back and re-interview. And then the final option is a hard reject. And these don't happen often. It's mainly if you're just a complete jerk. But we've met all you and none of you are jerks. So I don't anticipate any of you getting
Most
a hard reject.
of you. Not jerks.
Anyway, so those are...
But really, it's not just being a jerk. I have on the outside seen, like, I didn't give these rejects myself, but I have heard, basically, if you're not someone that the interviewer wants to work with, if they don't want to pair with you for whatever reason, maybe they threw something at you and you just went, oh, God, I fucking hate doing this, or something. Like anything like that, like that's a bad sign, because that means that you're going to get into the program, you're going to react that way, and your partner's like, oh no, like you want to be someone that people want to work with. I recently had someone even ask like someone higher up, they were like, they were technically pretty decent and they seemed like a decent person, but literally every 15 seconds they just went, and it's like, nobody wants to work with that, like be someone that you would want to work with, like someone who likable. Exactly. That is big. So. Yeah.
And we can definitely, as it gets close to that time, go over like some anti-patterns that are common that people, you may not even realize like the sighing. You may not even realize that you're doing it, but it's like, ooh, red flag. Let's not do that. Same thing with like going and when someone during the interview, they may throw like new material that you've never seen before. And instead of shying away from that material and being like, ooh, like actually maybe I can solve this a different way without using the approach that you gave me. Confronting that new material head on and being like, ooh, a new challenge. Like, cool. Let's see what this has. So anyway, but that for a later time. But anyway, here are the next step, deadlines, and how that works. So that's basically it. As you can see here, you'll go to Remote Prep Module 1 to start. And here, as you can see, it tells you the setup, how to do it. Again, it reiterates the instructions on the first name, last name, and kind of walks you all the way through Replit and how you should approach this course material. All right. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do kind of have a question, actually. So if I am in my Slack right now, and I paste this YouTube link there, can you guys open that? Do you have access to that? It's not for our class, but it was for a class that I worked on. This is RP43. We are RP51. We had technical difficulties with some of our YouTube uploading. So here is basically all of the material. Sometimes you're going to meet this nice guy named Garrett, who is very smart. Listen to what he says, and sometimes you will see me. If you scroll down to like 27, you're going to see Test-Driven Development Part 1. And then there's also 28, which is Test-Driven Development Part 2. And there's also below that, each, map, filter, and reduce functions. Below that, we have asserting validity and assert function. Pretty much anything to do with test-driven development or higher order functions, I definitely recommend you viewing not during class time. Like during class time, you need to be doing the problems. But if you really want to get into the program, go here, look at this stuff. It's going to help you. If you miss days and you were like, oh man, I missed last week, I missed 2 days, those lectures are going to be on there. And again, it's probably not going to be Keely or me. It might be me. It's the same material. If you have any questions about any of the videos on there or anything that maybe we haven't covered that you want to cover, please reach out. I will totally look into maybe doing some sort of like live coding and we can go over some stuff. Yeah, we are available here for you, even though like this program is very much shifting from how it's been. It's not lecture heavy anymore.